You can see we're broadcasting live here today from South Summit HQ here in Madrid, and I have with me Maria Nejumea, founder and CEO. Maria, thank you so much for having us this year. Thank you for hosting yet another edition of InCubed. Tell me, Maria, how important are these types of initiatives to the entrepreneurial ecosystem? Ahí te veía, claro. ¿Se ve el móvil mío? ¿No? Ni en las rodillas, ¿no? Tampoco. Ay, espera. Y cuando mete lo voy a ver ahí. Vale. ¿Cuándo empiezo yo? Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this year's edition of InCubed. I am Liz Fleming, and I will be your host for this evening. I am delighted to be here to accompany you through the next 90 minutes to 2 hours of exciting content that we have prepared. So welcome to InCubed 2020 online. InCubed is a platform to connect the scale-up ecosystems of Spain and the US. It is founded in 2014. This is our 6th edition, and it is a joint initiative between 5 of the key players in the Spanish startup ecosystem. The US Embassy here in Madrid, Chamberí Valley Association of Scale-Up Entrepreneurs, South Summit, the global platform for accelerating innovation, Endeavour, the leading international program for high-impact entrepreneurship, and the Venture City, a venture capital and acceleration firm supporting entrepreneurs on both sides of the Atlantic. InCube brings together 3 pillars of the ecosystem: innovators, investors, and institutions. We talk to representatives from Spain and also from the US to learn from each other, share best practices, explore opportunities for collaboration, and see what opportunities are out there today more than ever. We have an exciting program lined up for you. We're going to talk about stories from the trenches. We're going to talk to entrepreneurs who have been there, done it before, and lived to tell the tale. We will also have some insights into today's ecosystem in Spain, and of course, an amazing keynote from our wonderful speaker today, Jason Lemkin, who's founder and CEO of Saster and of EcoSign. But before we begin, let's have a few words from some of our founding partners of InCubed. I am delighted to welcome today and hand the word over to the US Ambassador to Spain and Andorra, Mr. Duke Buchanan III. Over to you.
Buenos dias. Welcome to the 6th annual InCubed event. Every year, the U.S. Embassy proudly partners with Endeavour Spain, Chamberí Valley, Spain Startup to organize InCubed, the only event in Spain focused on scale-up. InCubed is going to be one of the top events organized by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. Year after year, InCubed has connected Spanish entrepreneurs with each other and with U.S. partners and investors. Great things come from these connections. Now more than ever, we need the connections and the successes that InCubed provides. La pandemia ha provocado algunos cambios, pero nos hemos unido y apoyado. Hemos devuelto la mirada al peligro y nos hemos enfrentado a él de frente. A lo hecho pecho, ahora somos más fuertes. If there's one thing we have learned this year, it is that we need to work together to respond to rapid and unexpected changes in our lives, to solve problems that we never dreamed of facing. As entrepreneurs, this is what you do for a living. You create, you innovate, you respond. Through InCubed, we connect the problem solvers, the entrepreneurs, the believers in change from Spain and the United States. InCubed strengthens the ties between our countries and helps increase prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic. This moment presents an incredible opportunity because it's truly a transformational period in our lives. Both my wife and I started our own businesses, so we know the challenges and the opportunities that you face. Even our daughter carries on this legacy. She is inspiring young women from her generation to pursue careers in science and technology with her Let's Bots projects around Spain. As part of this project, underserved schoolgirls in Cádiz and in Fuenlabrada, along with dozens of teachers, learned to build and program robots. My daughter's goal was to spark a fire that will lead to a passion for science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. These experiences today could make these young women into leaders in STEM fields tomorrow. But we do not need to wait for tomorrow in order to meet today's challenges. We have the tools and knowledge now to keep our businesses, our countries, and our people moving forward. To dream big, to start new, innovative, and game-changing products. Everyone loves a good comeback story, and ours is being written now. Porque España y Estados Unidos somos socios, aliados y amigos. Porque juntos somos más fuertes. Como diría Rafa Nadal, vamos, Estados Unidos y España, la remontada, vamos a ganar. Let's show the world what we can accomplish together. Thank you, muchas gracias.
Excellent. Vamos, embajador. Thank you so much for your support at InCubed and for always supporting the Spanish startup ecosystem. Now, you might have suspected, but we are actually broadcasting today from the South Summit HQ in Madrid, and I am thrilled to be joined with founder and CEO of South Summit, Maria Benjumea. Maria, thank you so much for having us here today. We're thrilled to have you back again hosting us for InCubed. Can you tell us how important are initiatives like InCubed to you?
Thank you, Liz. It's great being here again and in Cube. It's great listening to the ambassador saying a por todas, we go, we vamos, because really we are in an incredible moment in the ecosystem. I think that after this pandemic, where we are just in the middle of this pandemic, what we have proved to ourselves is that we can do everything that we really want to go on. So I think that's a great news for entrepreneurs, because the entrepreneurs, we are just the key engine for the economic development, and now to go through the crisis and to move on. So I think that this initiative, where partners like the American Embassy, the Chamberí Valley, Endeavor, and the Venture City, and support it. And this is very important for Guaira, that Guaira really is a key player in this ecosystem. Just putting together the different players is something really incredible. So being together, innovators, investors, and institutions all together fostering the ecosystem and connecting a great ecosystem like is US with this great ecosystem too in Spain, with these incredible entrepreneurs. I'm sure that all together we are going through not only this crisis, just the transformation of society. I really feel absolutely privileged to be part of this initiative, that this is its 6th edition.
Excellent, Maria, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having us back again this year. I share a lot of your sentiment, and South Summit know all about connecting ecosystems, and it's really the core of what you do here in Spain and overseas and around the world at an international level. So, moving on to our program for this evening, the first topic up for discussion is a little deeper dive into the ecosystem of what's actually happening here in Spain. It has been an extremely turbulent year for everybody across the globe. But what is the impact that that's having on the investment landscape here in Spain? And to share some insights into that, we invite a dear friend to the show, which is Javier Mejías, the Startup Program Director at Bankinter Foundation. Javier, delighted to have you with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely, as always. Well, let me share my screen. I'm hearing myself. Let me share some ideas. First, what about the source I'm going to discuss? Well, we have created an extensive database at the Bankinter Innovation Foundation, where we try to cover all the investment activity in Spain, because we think it's something critical to bring transparency. So there you will find both an investment tool, an interaction tool, and also quarterly report. Well, first let's get to the insights. Well, the first one would be that the investment volume at first, we thought that the year was going to be a total disaster. As you can see in the first quarter of the year, we had a slight drop down. I would say at that time we thought it was really hard. But it seems the year is recovering. As you can see, we are more or less at the same level of investment than the previous year. But what is quite interesting to see here is that the deals have increased a lot. We are already ahead of all the deals done in the year 2019. And I think that's really interesting, because these deals are going to be the indicator of health of the underlying ecosystem. If we analyze this information by the tranche, we see something that for me is really positive, which is that from the pre-seed stage to rounds up to 20 million, what we see is that we have already invested more money than all the previous years. And it's something I think really positive, because these rounds are going to be the seeds of the upcoming rounds in the next years. But we also see here something important, which is a drop down in the investment activity of larger rounds. Here you can see that the rounds from 20 to 50 million and larger than 50 million are way lower than the previous years. And this means that the average investment ticket is lower. Makes sense, and we are not going to discuss a lot about this. What I think it's also really positive is that you can see here in all the initial stages, seed, pre-seed, Series A, and Series B, we are seeing big increases. And this is something that it's going to be like a common theme across all the analysis we are going to do. If we analyze this information also by who is investing the money, we can see that, VCs seem to be investing less money, 22% less than the previous year, but they are doing 40% more deals. That has to do with the fact that the tickets are lower. But two interesting things. First one would be that the corporates finally seem to be picking up in Spain. It's usually quite difficult to convince those corporates to invest in startups, even though across Europe is something that is already happening. But sorry, seems there's like echo. I'm receiving some messages about this. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah. Sorry, Javier. Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Apologies for the background echo noise. We're trying to solve that. Welcome to live events.
Sorry.
Apologies.
Sorry, guys.
Is that okay now?
Okay. Yeah, perfect. I'm going to keep on. Okay. So I was discussing about the source of the funds. Well, as I'm already again hearing my echo, so it seems it's on your side. Okay, no, not anymore. Okay. So the other interesting thing is that crowdfunding sites seem to be finally picking up in Spain, and even though they are focused on the earlier runs, it seems they are growing like cloud. If we see this information by the source of the funds, we can see something interesting. Usually in Spain, we have seen that foreign investors accounted for, let's say, 15 to 20% of the deals, but they meant regarding the amount invested, like 50 to 60. It seems the weight of the foreign investors has gone down a bit, but it has to do probably with two facts. The first one would be that, as you may imagine, foreign investors usually invest in later stage rounds, as they are lower amount of rounds. You can see here that the investors are not doing so many deals. Also, dealing with the mix of the source of funds, here we can see a trend that has been being discussed in the US for some time now, which is many VCs there are saying that companies in the US are too expensive, so they should be focusing more and more on Europe. Well, what we see here is that there's a huge increase in the amount of funds coming from North America, which is something really positive, and also an increase of domestic investors. Well, as you probably know, there are lots of new funds here in Spain that are committed to investing in Spanish companies, and that's really, really positive. And also interesting to see that the Asian investors are not doing a lot of deals. I would say almost none up to this point in time. Well, if we can see the investment by location, you can see here two interesting things. The first one would be that Barcelona, which has been traditionally the number one hub in Spain, and still is the number one hub, but it's declining over the years. If we compare Barcelona investment this year to the previous one, it's lower by 22%. Madrid is more or less about the same amount, but we are seeing Valencia grow a lot. We'll discuss later about this growth. But what I think it's really interesting here is that we have seen a different mix. The investment in the two main hubs, Barcelona and Madrid, has gone down by 13%, but the investment in the rest of Spain has grown by almost the double, more than the double. And in my opinion, my theory is that it has to do with the fact that we VCs are taking more and more meetings via video conference, and that breaks the location dependence. We'll see if this trend settles. We discuss and see this by the industries. Well, usually, as you know, mobility and logistics has been the top industry in Spain with companies like Glovo and Cabify. And this year it still is the number one, but it's going by the investment volume like 50% less. It's normal as they are impacted by the COVID crisis. But fintech is the second one, closely to the first one, and it's something that we are seeing across Europe. Fintech is growing quite a lot. But what I think it's really interesting is to see the impact of COVID. Even though the volume invested in health and well-being is not that high, we can see here that by the number of deals, it's not only the record of deals until now in this year, but also the record of deals in health and well-being investment operations in Spain for the last 3 years. And of course, as you may imagine, gaming and entertainment and education are growing a lot. And travel and tourism, it has been bigly impacted by the pandemic. But even though there are right now lots of operations being done there. Well, this is the top 10 deals closing in Spain by now. I'm not going to spend much time here. But as you can see, we have two big rounds, one Glovo and the other one Flywire, a company with base in Valencia. But the fact is that there are only 3 main rounds that are larger than 50 million. Finally, dealing with the exit activity, what we investors care, well, probably all of you know that the of Idealista was the highest in the history of Spain, and probably has been one of the largest in Europe so far. But it's not only about Idealista. As you can see, we are almost close to 2,000 millions in exit this year. And the other interesting fact is that we are growing a lot in the number of exits done. So very positive, the trend here. We will see if this consolidates, but seems to be the case. And final remarks. I think that the underlying health of the ecosystem it's really good. Even though we have not closed yet enough larger rounds, we are seeing more and more Series A and Series B rounds, which are going to be the seeds of the Spanish investment activity in the upcoming years. So I'm quite positive about this fact, and also about the fact that even amid the pandemic, most entrepreneurs and startup founders have found a way to turn upside down their business models and grow, which is everything is about. Thanks a lot. Here you can see my contact details and the URL of this Startup Observatory, and of course I will be more than delighted to share with you if this presentation if you need it. Thanks a lot.
Javier, thank you so much. Amazing to hear what's going on in the ecosystem today in this turbulent time. And fascinating to see actually that US investors are investing more this year. So interesting trend to see, and particularly interesting trend to identify here at InCubed, where we're talking about connecting these two wonderful ecosystems. And talking about connecting with the US ecosystem, we are now moving on to our next special guest today. I am so excited to introduce our next speaker. This speaker has an incredible profile, and we're so thrilled to have him participate at this year's InCubed. Our next speaker is one of the most recognized individuals globally in the world of SaaS, or software as a service, which is a Miguel Arias. Miguel Arias is a great friend of InCubed, one of the founding members of InCubed. He is a founding member of the Chamberí Valley Entrepreneurs Association and is now head of entrepreneurship in Telefonica. So it's thanks to Miguel that we have Jason with us today, and Miguel is going to join us in a little moment to facilitate the fireside chat with Jason. And also to mention Wyra, of course, is our global partner for InCubed this year. So we are so grateful for their help and delighted to have them with us at this year's edition of InCubed. How are we doing, team? Earth to Jason, we have you.
Sorry, WebRTC is cool, but it is not always the best technology. So I'm here. Sorry, I had to to do a switch, but give me just 1 second, and then we can start. Let me just find that link to that Zoom that you have. Hold on just 1 sec. So sorry to everybody. I hope my introduction was really great and very auspicious. Let's see here. Zoom. Okay.
How are we doing?
How are we doing?
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Sorry for everyone having to do the live audio video check. Hopefully we didn't lose the audience. Okay, but if everyone can hear me, I will make up for a minute of lost time. And thought we would just, I know you just saw some slides about funding in the Spanish ecosystem and the European ecosystem. So maybe I'll just chat about what's happening in SaaS and Cloud closer to the ground out here, especially for folks across there in Europe. So the quick title, although this will be short, and then we'll do more Q&A, is Conquering the US and More After a Global Pandemic. So I know there was an intro just quickly about me, SaaSter. Thank you for everyone if you've read our content over the last 8 years.
Jason, can you just pop your slides in full screen, please, and we'll have a better look at them.
Okay, but it creates some tech issues when I do that, but okay.
No worries.
But if I do it in full screen, then I can't see the video.
No worries. Drive on as you are.
Okay. SaaSter is, we get about 2 million views a month on our content, and hundreds of thousands of folks listening to our podcast and other content. But we're the world's largest community for SaaS execs and founders, and then I sort of became an accidental investor as well. I used to work at someone else's VC firm, and I raised about $100 million to invest myself. And somewhat accidentally, a lot of it became European-centric. The first three investments I did were sort of Europe to US, Pipedrive from Estonia, that's over 100 million in ARR, Talkdesk from Lisbon, which is now worth $3 billion. And then I sort of accidentally invested in a bunch of French startups, Algolia, Gorgeous, Front, Play-Doh, and others that are worth over $2 billion. And then a few others, Automile from Sweden, which just had about $100 million exit last week. And then my first sort of, it's really US, but I call it US and Spain, because the co-founders in Spain, Revenue Cat, which is a couple years old and crossed 200 million active users. So I've certainly over the last 6 or 7 years invested in Euro to US startups earlier than most, although somewhat accidentally. I myself have been a two-time founder. The last one I accidentally sold my SaaS company too early to Adobe. A company called EchoSign that's now part of Adobe. We grew to about 50 million ARR. Now it's almost 300 million ARR at Adobe. So that's me, and we also do a lot of our digital events, so check out SaaSter.com, visit us. But let's talk about some operational issues and funding. And this one you heard about a little bit in the prior presentation. But let me share some more tactical learnings from my portfolio in terms of what's happened in COVID. And I think there's sort of good and bad news that. Can you guys hear me? It's okay. Let me just make sure everyone can hear me. Can everybody hear me? I apologize. Can people hear me? I'm a little concerned that no one can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Jason, loud and clear.
Okay, sorry, this platform is not my favorite. Okay, so let's just talk about what I've seen. So for folks, anyhow, obviously this was hit on before, but there's a category of SaaS and cloud companies I started calling earlier COVID beneficiaries. It's an obvious term now, but folks that are benefiting from it, right? If you had, if you look at the page of the Wall Street, you would have seen that Caterpillar, which makes tractors across the world, is deeply struggling. 3M is struggling a bit, but on the right side, you saw that Microsoft had not only have a record quarter, but Azure beat Windows. Azure is now bigger than Windows. So its cloud business, even though it's a distant number 2 to Amazon, is bigger than its whole Windows property. So obviously cloud is on fire, and COVID accelerated it, as all we know. So let me give you 3 examples of how fundraising is different now. So TalkDesk, which is a cloud contact center, I invested in 2014 when it was 1 US employee and 6 in Lisbon. They tripled their valuation in a matter of months from 1 billion to 3 billion, as folks immediately needed to leave call centers, physical call centers, and go to the cloud. And I'll give you an example of why that tripled. It's not just froth in the market, but TalkDesk had one of its first 8-figure a year customers, 10 million. And it was planned to be a 3-year deployment to go from their existing legacy systems to TalkDesk. That got moved up to 3 weeks. So 3 years to 3 weeks, if that happens enough, obviously your revenue is going to accelerate and your value is going to accelerate. Another Euro to US one, Gorgeous, which is a e-commerce focused contact center, sort of a Zendesk for e-commerce. They've done well. They're very, very strong in the Shopify ecosystem. And they were worth about 90 million before COVID, and now they're worth 300 million. Because of the acceleration in e-commerce. And what's interesting for both of these is that these deals happened virtually. They happened over Zoom. TalkDesk got several term sheets in 2 weeks at 3 billion. Gorgeous got 4 term sheets in less than a week from top VCs. And none of these meetings happened in person whatsoever. And then the third one, and let me tie together the point, the third one just from this Euro portfolio, Revenue Cat, with Miguel, the Spanish co-founder. Right after COVID hit, they began to see some acceleration as mobile took off, mobile apps, and Revenue Cat helps you manage billing on mobile apps. It's the leading app to do that. They power 4 of the top 10 apps on the App Store. They raised 18 million in 3 days from Index, and this was my aha moment without ever meeting in 3 days. So what's happening here? Like, these are incredible deals. These are COVID beneficiaries. These are Euro to US, at least in part, companies getting a benefit. But importantly, and others may tell different stories, but from my group, the last point's important. All of these companies were known before. In some cases, the investors had met the folks physically before. If not, they had tracked the company for a long time and had a chance to get to know them. I have not yet seen in my portfolio huge investments going into companies that the VCs had no awareness of before March, before COVID hit. And to put differently, I think as you saw in the prior presentation, venture money is flooding into cloud. It's flooding, but it's flooded into known companies, either later stage deals or early stage deals where folks were able to meet the founders before COVID hit. But that's obviously going to continue to change. So I put it at the top. What do I see in VC funding and SaaS? It's clearly on fire. I mean, these deals happen in days, and VCs are taking more risk than ever. But it's really mostly, at least as I see it, benefiting you if you're hot and known. So find a way to be that. The second point I just thought I would touch on 3 that I think about a lot and I think is especially important for folks in Spain and Europe is, does the Bay Area exist? Does it exist? You know, at Sapster, we have an office in downtown San Francisco in the design district. And also we have one in Palo Alto, a small office, and San Francisco is just empty. I mean, there's nobody there. There's very little COVID here because of it compared to the rest of the US, but it's empty. I don't think San Francisco exists as a tech center today. In fact, we've moved to Palo Alto just because it's cleaner and safer. And we have these small little pod offices where everyone has their own little office. And I did a little survey of my portfolio, which is yes, it has a European element to it, but it's still very Bay Area centric. The average portfolio company I have now, 20% of the teams in the Bay Area versus 70% before. So while many of the founders are often still here, people have been hiring, people have been growing. Many companies, startups have tripled since COVID hit, and they're not hiring folks in San Francisco. They're hiring folks wherever. So the longer this goes on, and the longer we're all distributed companies, the less SF is going to matter. But a few counterpoints on that I'm thinking about. The second one is VCs haven't left. Certainly, there is a generational split, I would say, in the Bay Area. Older VCs, and I put older folks that have kids, nobody's left. They may have moved to Lake Tahoe for a little while for a break. And who knows, I guess if skiing opens up, they'll hit their fancy homes for the winter if they can get there. But all the VCs are here. They're all still here, although the younger generation has dispersed, as have many folks, non-founders on teams. And importantly, but since the VCs are here and they're not going anywhere, and don't forget, 75% of the CEOs in their headquarters are here. Salesforce is here, Twilio here. And at the right, you can see a analysis I did on SaaStr a little while ago. You can find it. What percent of leading cloud companies, leading SaaS companies are in the Bay Area? And obviously plenty aren't. You can build an Adyen, you can build a Shopify, you can build a great SaaS company, especially when focused on SMBs anywhere. But the reality is 80% of the market cap's in the Bay Area. So if you want to, when we come out of COVID, if you want to meet with the CEOs, if you want to build those relationships, if you want to have serendipity and bump into people, likely the Bay Area, at least at the top, at least at the CEO level, is still going to be important. But will it be important below that? It's an open question. And I wanted to highlight two things, though, that are radically different in terms of the Bay Area still exists for SaaS and cloud. The fourth point is so transformational, which is that VCs don't care if you're here anymore. Now, that used to be true after 10 million. I remember when Excel invested into Atlassian from Australia, it's like, well, it doesn't matter. They're at 40 million in ARR. It doesn't matter if it's harder to build a SaaS or cloud company from Australia. They're at 40 million ARR, growing 100% a year. Who cares? And Excel did a whole run of those types of investments outside of the Bay Area that were already at scale. Who cares if it's harder to hire a VP of sales or VP of marketing if you've already hit liftoff? It doesn't matter. But notwithstanding the rush of capital to Europe over the last couple of years, notwithstanding the rush of capital across the globe, I would say the majority of VCs still care. They still would prefer if you were in the SF Bay Area. It's the truth, but no one cares anymore. No one cares anymore. So that's profoundly different for Spanish and European entrepreneurs. And the last point, and this one kind of floored me maybe just the last 30 to 45 days, which is that really there are several reasons historically to move to the Bay Area, which we'll hit on the last slide. There is the dynamic elements of it, the pressure to do better, the pressure to be the best. It works. Being around the best of the best makes you better. It's frankly the number one reason to still come to the Bay Area, even during COVID. And 2 was capital. 3 was the ecosystem we talked about, that Salesforce and Twilio and everyone are here. But the 4th reason was, and this is how I got to meet so many European founders, was that the VPs were here. I would meet so many European founders in the early days, the Showpads from Belgium, the Pipedrives, the others, the TalkDesks, the Algolias. And the reason I would meet them is because they needed to hire a VP of sales or a VP of marketing, and no one back in Estonia or even Paris or London, this bench wasn't there. And I think to a large extent, that's still true. Paris, I can tell you with all the French startups I've invested in, forget about Barcelona or Madrid, Paris and London are not full of amazing VPs of sales and VPs of marketing and VPs of customer success. They aren't. There's not that trove of experienced VPs because they come out of the Dropboxes and all the folks that are here, like all the folks on this list. They come out of the Workdays and everyone that you can see on this list, and they'll come out of the Zooms and the Twilios and the Oktas. So the VPs are here. But I was shocked when several of high-profile VPs I know, folks that have done this several times before, joined European startups recently, just raw. And they would never do that before. A CMO or a CRO, a top VP of sales or VP of marketing, you always want to be close to the CEO. You want to be her right-hand person. So if they're in the Bay Area, you'd always want to find someone here to be, but in this distributed world, it doesn't matter. So for the first time ever in my 7 years of investing in European to US startups and much longer in cloud, if you are in Europe, and maybe anywhere, but especially in Europe, you can hire Bay Area VPs. You can hire San Francisco VPs in cloud. And this is crazy differentiator. And so I still believe, and we'll hit this on the next and last slide, I still believe it's worth coming here. But the biggest reason, the biggest advantage was always talent. And now that talent will join you in Europe, boy, make this happen somehow. And you may need your investors to help you. That's what I've seen happen is investors pull them in. But the fact that you can hire a Bay Area trained seasoned VP as you're scaling, you may not need this person in the beginning, but as you hit 2 million or 5 million or 10 million or 20 million ARR, the fact that you can find this talent is just profound. And so here's my final point, which is just thinking about it. So should you come here at all? Investors don't care. If you have a brand, no one will care. And you can get the VPs for the first time. I'm not saying it's as easy as if you're here, but it really works. But I would say, notwithstanding this global pandemic, in some ways, if you squint, especially when you're in Palo Alto, not San Francisco in the Bay Area, when you see Palo Alto, you can see in some ways nothing's changed. Just 2 nights ago, I was walking in downtown Palo Alto near our office, and I was at a fancy restaurant outdoors, and the entire partnership of a venture fund was having dinner together. All of them, a well-known venture fund. They were all together. Whether they should have been without masks at dinner, let's put that apart. But they were all there at a top venture firm at this restaurant. Last week, another top 5 venture fund, I saw a top partner having lunch at a restaurant there with a top cloud CEO that we know. It's still here. All over the place, you can see walks and talks. People take walks with founders, and they're distanced, but they walk and they talk. And these personal relationships do matter. So are 100 founders a week pouring into VC firms in South Park and Sand Hill and pitching raw? No. Those meetings are happening later in the funnel, later in the sales cycle, closer to when deals are getting done. But it's happening. And yes, I said, this is profound. You can hire a Bay Area VP from anywhere. So founders listening to this or doing this, step on the gas. Don't be intimidated. Try. You can do this. This is profound. This will make it so much easier to scale cloud and SaaS companies outside of the US and the Bay Area. But most VPs still want to work with an SF company at the end of the day. It's still better for them. They'll work with the company in Berlin or Barcelona or Paris, but they prefer to work with an SF company. Third point, and sorry for reading the bullets, but I think these are interesting to folks that don't know it. It's crazy. And look, this pandemic's getting worse in many ways, if you look at the metrics. But SF is starting to reopen. They're allowing 25% of the offices to reopen next week. And SF could get hit hard, but right now it has the lowest COVID prevalence of any major city in the US. And so it's reopening. The walks and talks are happening, and the VC dinners are happening, and SF is reopening. And if you squint, you can see a weird normalcy, new normalcy happening in the Bay Area. Now, we won't be out of this for a long time, maybe for 2 years, but a bit of a prime version, an iterated version of that old Bay Area centric world is coming back. The capital is here, as I put. And then just the last points to iterate. And again, sorry for reading the bullet points, but these are important. This 6th point, if you're enterprise, US customers still prefer a US vendor for the big dollars. They'd still rather talk to someone based in the US, a good old-fashioned US company, rather than someone over a connection to Europe or the rest of the world. It's not a gating item if you're the only vendor, but if there's 3 vendors in the US and you're the one that's closest to the customer, it does matter in the enterprise. And so the final point, and we talked about the hyper bush, I was speaking with a couple of French founders last year, and I asked them, why now, not from Spain, but from France, why do you still come to the US? Like, I understood this when I invested in Front and Algolia in 2014. But why today would you still come to the US when the ecosystem is bigger in Paris? And they said, these French entrepreneurs, very successful ones, said, yes, we can do this in France, but it's still better in the Bay Area. We still meet better people. The best of the best still come here, not all of them, but enough of them. You get pushed, you get challenged. It's still worth it to give yourself an edge. And that's, remember, an edge. And even if for now the edge in the Bay Area is smaller than it is for the rest of the world for SaaS, especially in enterprise, especially if recruiting, it's still here. So I guess my vote is, I've never been dogmatic about coming to the US, and I think I've always said you can fake it to a large extent, but the edge is still here. So if all things are equal, and even during COVID, if you can come here and you're building a SaaS or cloud company, I think it's worth it, even though these are weird times. But on the other hand, because you can recruit execs from anywhere, it's profoundly different. So we'll see. But I love this one from Sudeep on the right. I put in a SaaStr post from Felicis. Everyone says the Bay Area is dead, but look at the latest, S1s. These companies have now gone public. Snowflake, Unity, Asana, Sumo Logic, JFrog. They're here. So, that edge is still here. So I think that's what I had. Say hi to me. I'm sorry about the tech issues. They're at least 70% my fault. I'm on Twitter at JasonLK, SaaStr.com, and if everything's working well, or I'll switch, we'll kind of do our deep dive from here.
Wonderful. Just checking if you can hear me. Everybody, can you hear me, please, Jason? Well, at least we can do that. So let's check briefly if we can also be heard by everybody outside. Just very briefly. Can you tell us if we are being heard properly? Because I'm going to start apologizing to Jason. I want everybody to hear that.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, so then let's Let's get started. So, Jason, I mean, first of all, I'm really sorry for the technical glitches. They are 0% your fault. Actually, I founded a webcasting startup like a few, maybe, I know, no thing. I mean, started a webcasting startup like 15 years ago, and this is still an issue. So, well, I think Zoom is going to really kill it. So yeah. And I have to say, I mean, Zoom is going to kill it's going to win everything, I feel, right? So I want to say, I mean, I'm pretty nervous today because I feel like a groupie with his rock and roll star. You know, it's like, oh my goodness, I get to be with Jason in the same room. Sometimes I even feel like you are inside my head, right? That you are tweeting exactly what I'm thinking about for the last, I don't know, 15 years. It's almost magical. But then I understood the same happens with so many other people, so I'm not the only one. So
that's the trick, isn't it? That's the secret.
Exactly. And so first of all, I would like to thank Marine so much, Jason. It's just amazing. I'm trying to think how you do it. I mean, how are you able to write all this while running a fund, while running the company, while everything else? So first of all, I mean, how are you able to find the time to talk about such interesting topics all the time?
Well, you know, if you want actually the real lesson that's helpful for, I mean, I you know, we all have learned for founders, for executives, content marketing is important, right? Content marketing is an important source of leads for most cloud and marketing companies. And if you look at a lot of folks, they do content marketing wrong. They hire an agency to write blog posts for them. They start a podcast that 4 people listen to. They do, you know, we have 700 people registered for it. They do a digital event that no one comes to. My obvious learning for content marketing, yet founders do it wrong, as do VPs of marketing, is, you know, do what's easy and do what you're passionate about, right? It sounds silly, but people do this wrong. If there's one topic in your industry you're passionate about, write one blog post. Don't write 50 terrible blog posts. Write one canonical blog post on how something works in your industry. One post. In the early days of SaaStr, we were lucky, but I also wrote this canonical post on how to hire a great VP of sales. I mean, this was so canonical that everyone found this. And all the other 4,000 pieces of content matter. It's one example. Revenue Cap, that Spanish one I talked about, right? You can search on SaaStr for what they did, and the CEO wrote this blog post about why iOS billing is such a pain and how to get it to work, and that blew up. And they knew it. This team knew this that nobody else knew. Miguel, the CTO, who's Spanish, and the CEO knew this, and so that one blog post was worth more than 100 lame other things. So that's the real lesson. So for SaaStr, my secret for writing, for speaking, for tweets, for all the crazy things we do is I only do things that not only am I passionate about, but they're already written in my head. This is the way I am. If I haven't already written an article in my head, I don't do it, right? Those slides that I sort of struggled to present, but I already had written them in my head before I wrote them. It took me 15 minutes to do that presentation, not the 9 hours it takes our average speaker. And so figure out, don't feel the pressure. If you're good at something, as founders, as CEOs, we have to find a way to be marketers, right? Even though we're not classically trained in marketers, but the CEO's job is to be a marketer, isn't it? To hustle, to get out there. And so, yeah, try everything. Try to get on TechCrunch. Try to do whatever, but find what you're passionate about and good at, and just do it, and it will eventually work. And every person will tell you that in content marketing, right?
And I think you mentioned once, and I fully agree, it compounds, right? I mean, the effect of what you do then, you cannot even understand what's going to happen in 5 years' time about that blog post that, by the way, everybody here read about the VP sales. So yeah, absolutely.
It all does compound, right? Yeah.
Totally. So, I mean, you know, we started this kind of events in Cube, trying to connect the US and Europe already 6 years ago, right? And we did that with the help of the US ambassador at the time, James Coster. And then the ecosystem was at its infancy, right? And you've seen how much it grew when you saw the slides that Javier presented, right? And what we see now is that Spain is going to be one of the countries most severely hit by COVID, right? And we're going to still have to face the second wave and the economic crisis after that. And I don't want to talk about the looming future here. I mean, there is enough talk about the looming future already. So I would love to talk about how entrepreneurs can manage uncertainty, and they can be sick optimists and then try to do something different, right, to rebuild the country. So, I mean, for me, one step is to look outside and to look into the US. And particularly after the numbers you share and the passion you put there, I'm packing my suitcases again. And you have invested in all these European VCs, startups. So what is the common pattern that you've seen in these European entrepreneurs who succeed in the US? Do you see any pattern?
Well, look, yeah, it's, I think you need extreme drive and intensity, right? I hate, there's always those statistics, 98% of startups fail, 90, you hear those statistics all the time. I will just tell you, I'm not a high volume investor, but I've probably done 30 investments since 2013. You know how many have failed? 0. Okay, 0. You find, now, will they all be unicorns? No. You find an insanely committed founder, not a committed founder, not someone that believes, but insanely committed founder with 10 customers, with 10, she will get to 100, she will get to 1,000. This is classic SaaSter stuff, right? So that's why the question is, give yourself every edge, right? And I think that one thing, when I've been to Barcelona twice over the last couple of years. I went for a 0.9 Capital event, which was great, and met with a whole bunch of cloud founders, and then another. Then we had a team retreat, and I was sitting. Don't criticize me, Spanish entrepreneurs, for being on this, but I was sitting with a Spanish CEO who I love, and he's like, "What's the problem?" He's like, "Well, I'm already one of the 20 most successful startups in Barcelona." He's like, "I don't get challenged. I don't get challenged the same way." And if you it's a little quiet in San Francisco, but if even if you're the hottest company in San Francisco, Twilio is always hotter, right? And and Shopify is hotter than Twilio. You watch. I mean, we love Aaron Levy from Box's tweets, right? He's always lamenting how much easier Zoom is or Shopify than Box, but yet you would be so thrilled to have built a Box. And find a way. You got to find a way. If you're in the Bay Area, you almost get that automatically. You almost get this cohort that stresses you out, right? But if you're not there, I think you have to find it. I think you have to create it. Hang out with the best CEOs you can. Get a virtual group. Get a Zoom group going. And you always want to hang out with a couple CEOs that are a step or two above you, right? It's too much to hang out with Eric Wan today from Zoom, right? He's too far ahead of you, right? I mean, he's left the planet. He has left the planet. But if you're at 2 million ARR, find a couple CEOs that are at 6 million, 8 million to hang out with. If you're at 10, find someone at 20. And you need to be pushed and you need to be challenged in a way that you won't. And that's a danger of some areas, right? Especially during COVID. Yeah. You have to create those. And everyone has to find a group of mentors, a group of other CEOs or VPs to push them and challenge them. And you will do better if you do that.
Absolutely. I'm thinking like Madrid or Barcelona now have this first cohort of founders who sold companies by 50, 100 million euros who were successful and they are set for life, and they can help the ones starting, right? But you need to have the ones who will IPO, right? And that you can just find now in the Valley or New York, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what are the biggest failures you've seen? I mean, when somebody comes from Europe and thinks, I'm going to just conquer the US, it's easy and easy. Yeah. So what is the worst failure you've seen?
Well, I'll tell you the second worst failure first, and I'll tell you the worst failure. The second worst failure I see, which is not kill the startup. It never kills a startup, but which sets them back a year. And I first learned this from the co-founders at Showpad who came from Belgium. I was like the first person they met when they got here. And they're like, because there are differences between cultures, right? There are differences between cultures.
Yeah,
they're like,
totally.
They're like, we meet a US VP of sales. They all sound great. They all know all the terms. They all talk the talk. And like all the first VPs we hired were terrible because they all said the things we wanted to hear, but none of it. So they had trouble differentiating between talk the talk. And I see so many folks from outside the Bay Area, they'll come and they'll hire someone completely on logo. Oh, she worked at Twilio. She worked at Salesforce. She worked at Box. And we all do it, even folks that are bred in the Bay Area. We all love brands, right? We're all attracted to brands. But the further you are away from this culture, that you over-index on that brand and you hire that person and listen, I love everything about Twilio. I love Jeff Lawson. I love the company. But this is a company at $2 billion in revenue. If you hire someone at $2 billion in revenue, they do not know how to work at your little Spanish startup, do they? They have no idea. And I find that the European ones make this mistake to a fault. So when you hire the wrong VPs, you lose a year. You lose a year.
Let me tell you something, Jason. Yeah. It's even worse. I mean, for Spaniards, when we hear somebody who speaks English very well, then we think this person is competent. But these guys are native English speakers,
so it doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
and find mentors. I helped. It was funny with the show. When I was talking with PJ from Showpad, they hired one VP and two VPs, and I said, whatever you do, don't hire them. I said, don't, whatever, these are nice people.
And they did.
And they hired them anyway, and he's like, you were so right. But I at least I had the cultural framework to say, don't hire them. So find someone, it doesn't literally have to be me, just hire someone that's done it before and have them interview the English speaker that you fall in love with. And if they're hesitant, you may still want to hire them, but make sure you believe, right? Make sure you believe in them, not that you believe in the logo, right? So yeah.
So that was
the number one mistake.
Was this? Yeah.
But I don't see it that often in the European ones, okay? But I'll say it anyway. I see it very often in the European startups that don't move. But I see it less often in the ones that move, which is that it's going to take, no matter where you are, but especially me, and I have written about it, it's going to take you 2 years to get anywhere. It's going to take you 2 years to get anywhere. It's going to take you 8 months to have a half-decent product. It's going to take you 12 months to iterate that product so that anyone will buy it. It's going to take you 18 months to get to the point where enough people will buy it. It's going to take you 24 months until you can afford to hire that expensive engineer. It's going to take you 2 years. And I don't see this. This is why I love, or at least historically, I loved European founders, because they don't fall into this trap as often. But so many US folks are like, well, how could I afford that? How can I afford? It's going to take me 2 years to get there. It's not my problem. And when we did SaaS to Europa last year in Paris, I interviewed Tiago from TalkDesk. I was the first investor at TalkDesk, but I didn't know some of the early day stories. I'm like, Tiago, the first 2 years he had zero in revenue. I didn't really know that. I knew it was a little bit, but a lot of times with startups, we define day one a little loosely, right? So I define TalkDesk as going from like 0 to 1.4 million in 1 year. But the truth is there were 2 years before that. And I'm like, Tiago, how did you do that? I mean, he's so great. And he was kind of he was not really embarrassed. He's confident, but he said, I had to babysit. I had to babysit. So he came to the US and it was so tough. He had to babysit. And who's going to do that? Who's going to do that to get this off the ground? And so again, this is actually an advantage that European founders have, but how are you going to bridge those first 24 months? Don't tell me it's too hard. I don't care. The customers don't care, do they? Nobody cares if it's going to take you 2 years to get to $1 million in revenue or $500,000 in revenue. How are you going to do that? If you don't have an answer, quit or stay home.
Totally. And we talked a bit now about talent and how relevant talent is to grow your companies. And you mentioned we might have an inning, and that now VPs in the Bay Area may be open to European startups, while it might be hard. But what do we tell them? I mean, how do we get them to work with us? You mentioned investors. What can you tell us to try to get these great VPs to work with the European scale-ups?
Well, let me step back for a minute, because let me step back. There's a super important qualifier when I said that. Okay, a super important one. Remember how I said back in the days of Atlassian, Excel would invest, they were in Australia, but they had to have hit 10 million, right? They had to hit traction. Yeah. That's what these Bay Area VPs are waiting for. They're waiting for, and let me step back. It's even worse than it sounds. In 5, 6, 7 years ago when I started investing, a good VP would wait for 1 to 2 million in revenue to join a startup, okay? When I invested in TalkDesk and it was just Tiago here, or Algolia from France, when Nick was the only one here, I could introduce them to a top-tier VP of sales or marketing at $1 million, and they would join, because that's what they would wait. They wouldn't want to go too early. They would wait for $1 million or 2 million in ARR. Now the same candidate, and I'm talking about stretch VPs, not 50 years of experience, a stretch. Now they're waiting for 8 to 10.
Okay.
They're waiting for 8 to 10. Because there's so many startups. Like, let's imagine you're a hot VP of sales. Like, you worked at a hot company, at an Algolia, a Typeform, a whatever, a Revenue Cat, and you're a hot property, right? You can get offers. Would you join something at 1 million or 8 million for the same equity and more cash? Which would you pick, Miguel?
Yeah, absolutely. Which means, right? You need to then stay with your existing VPs, European VPs, or existing director of sales, and stretch them till you get this initial scale of 8 to 10 million ARR.
It's harder. That's harder, right? Harder. So when I say to European startups, you can get that VP now, you can, but you may need to be at 3, 4, 5, 6 million, or you may need to be hot. You may need to be growing quickly. The ones I've talked about were these well-known, I'm not going to name names, but these well-known US VPs joined. They didn't join something with 3 employees, okay? But nor did they join something with 500. They didn't join a message bird or whatever, but they joined something accelerating, right? Something that was almost hot. They're still waiting It's just instead of waiting to 5, 6, 8 million to join one in SF, they'll join that one in Berlin. So you'll have to go further in many ways to get a proven VP than you had to a few years back. It's just natural because there's so many startups, right? Everyone wants to recruit that person.
Understood. And you wrote that the first VP SaaS should hire is the VP marketing. But I'm asking, is this valid for the European start going to the US, or they should focus on the VP sales, which is going to open the US market for them?
It's just as valid. It's more valid.
Why do you think so? Why?
There's two reasons. First of all, wherever you are, whether you're in Barcelona or wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Look, maybe it's better to be in the Bay Area, but you will find a way to sell your product. Okay, you will find a way you will sell it poorly, but you will find a way with your passion and enthusiasm to sell some of your product. If you're this crazy founder, if you're this driven founder, and then when you find a way, then you will find a way to get 2 people to help you. 1 person and 2 people help you. You may have to train them. Like my learning from 2 visits to Barcelona is a lot of folks hire very entry-level salespeople, okay, right or wrong, okay? And they do that in the US too, but it's especially true in Barcelona. They'll hire someone that's 21, 22, and of course you have to train them. I mean, good God, you've got to train them. But you'll power through it as a founder, and you'll get a couple of good ones, and you'll train them, and what's the simplest thing to do is give them more leads. It's the simplest thing you can do to grow faster. So hiring that VP of demand gen works even better when you are going to struggle to find the perfect VP of sales, because these kids won't be perfect, but you'll get 2 of them, and then you'll get 3, and then they'll bring in their best friend, and then you'll have 4, and then you'll have 5, and then you'll have a real squad there. And what you want to do is feed the squad. Yes, do you want a better leader for the squad? Of course. Do you want, but feed the squad. So it's always going to work. And then the second reason is VPs of demand gen, directors of demand gen, directors of marketing, they've always been willing to take a little more geographical risk. You can always find someone that, oh, she's French. Oh, she's Spanish. Like, there's not a million of them, but they'll take a little more risk than the VP of sales. The VP of sales takes so much risk, okay? They're leaving, let's say they're leaving a startup, they're making 500,000 US a year, and they have 10 great reps, and they're hitting quota. It's not just the money. They have a lot of equity, a lot of cash, a team, and they're in a groove. They're in a groove. What happens if you leave that deal for a startup? Okay, well, even if they claim they're going to pay you 500, you have to build it's bonus. You have to build your way. Your base might be 150. Boy, that's a lot of risk. My equity starts over again. Boy, that's a lot of risk. My 10 great reps, only 2 of them are coming. Oh my God. And then this product might be harder than my last job. So it's super risky. But a VP of marketing, he or she might say, you know what? I always loved, even during the pandemic, I always loved Barcelona. So I'm not moving, Miguel, but I'll take that job. So it is easier to recruit that hire earlier, and they will work better with a raw team than the VP of sales. So it's even more true distributed. Like, find that person.
I got stuck with the I'm not moving that you mentioned, and I want to put this in your own body and head, is that we would love to be able to lure the likes of Jason Lenkin to Spain to live. I mean, our quality of life, as you know, is super high. Is there anything that we can do in the ecosystem to bring the Jasons to Madrid, Barcelona, to Spain, to live here? What do you think? Is it impossible?
I think it's harder now. Here's what I think.
Because of the pandemic. The pandemic makes it harder for you. You think
because of the cloud. Because of the cloud. Here's what the thing is. Listen, I've been to Barcelona twice in the last 2 years. I love it. If there were no COVID or if there was a COVID bubble, I'd probably go now, even though it gets a little cold in the winter. I do love Barcelona. But the thing is, unicorns became decacorns. Unicorns became decacorns in COVID. Shopify was worth, 20 billion before COVID? It's worth 120 billion today. Zoom IPO'd at 4 billion. It's worth 140 billion today. Yeah. We are all seeking gold. Like, as founders, it's not all about the money. It is not, or you can't be a great founder. But we're still seeking gold. Those unicorns became decacorns. Why in your right mind would you want to leave the gold rush of California? This is a gold rush of cloud today. a gold rush of cloud. Okay. When I wrote that talk desk, that Portugal investment memo video on our YouTube channel, Talk Desk and SaaStr, you'll see that when I wrote the investment memo in 2014, I said Talk Desk is an amazing company, but the most it could ever be worth is 150 million. The most. Today it's worth 3 billion, and it will be worth 10 billion in the next 24 months. Why would you leave? Now these people will say, like, the taxes are going to be so bad in California next year. These taxes are going to go through the roof because of our deficits, and I mean it's terrible.
Yeah.
And some people will leave for these reasons, but there's gold in these hills. There's gold here. I mean, there's so many unicorns. Why would you leave? Why would you go to Spain? No, you want to be here. Even though San Francisco's empty, even though we've all flattened and become distributed, you got to be where the gold is, don't you? So in a way, like, it would be easier, as strange as it sounds, it would have been easier to go to Paris or Barcelona a few years ago before cloud went into overdrive, right? So that's my thesis. Others may differ, but every VC that has been in cloud for 5 years, in SaaS or cloud for 5 years, is now a genius. They're a genius. They're a genius. Why, unless you're retiring, you think you're such a genius.
Jason, it's a very good point, and for me, it's the finishing point for this amazing conversation. I mean, everybody in hindsight is a genius. What's going to happen in the next 5 years? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in cloud or anything SaaS or technology? What do you think about the next 5 years?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know. I think that if you think about cloud penetration, and there's different segments, but we've obviously gone through a cyclical change that was so much more powerful than we ever envisioned, right? The cyclical change to cloud, right? But if you look and you say, hey, if you look at the Gartner numbers and you say, hey, we're about 20% cloud penetrated, okay, whatever the number is, it could be 15, it could be 25.
Still huge.
As that crosses 50 or 60%, the growth is going to slow down. Now, the numbers will continue to be epic. The numbers at AWS and Microsoft and Snowflake, the numbers will be great. But at some point, as you cross 50, 60%, 70% market share, the growth slows down, doesn't it? So this switch to cloud, the Azure, AWS, this Snowflake thing, it has to end in 4 to 5 years because it's done, right? It's played out. But it doesn't mean that the second order effects, the next effects don't happen, right? So is, this, maybe some of this, the 1.0 cloud transition ends in 4 to 5 years because of market transition, but the app revolution has another 5+ years in it, and 10 years is enough for us, right? We don't need to see too much further than that. We can build billion-dollar companies in 10 years. But I think like the transition to cloud can't last forever, can it? It has to finish.
Yeah, but it will be something else, which is, as you said, already being cooked as we speak, right? So, Jason, I mean, we are
multi-cloud, all of it.
Yeah, we are running out of time, and I would just take the last minute to really thank you. You first fulfilled one of my dreams, which is being able to have a conversation with you. Check. So that's amazing. And the second dream I have is that we get to have you in Spain soon, in person, once the pandemic is over. We can invite you for lunch, and we can discuss this longer and in person. So I would really love to thank you for the really great insights. Wish you best of luck. I don't feel you're gonna need much luck, but nonetheless, and stay safe. Stay safe, mate.
All right, thanks everybody. If there were questions we didn't get to them, I'll get them later and we'll follow up. All right, thanks everyone. Sorry for the IT hiccups in the beginning.
Thank you, Jason, Miguel. What a fascinating session. Amazing to learn from your guys' experiences, and great to learn from the stories told of European entrepreneurs in the SaaS space and how they are landing in San Francisco, which is still thriving in a different way, but certainly still thriving even with the pandemic today. It sounds like it is the golden era in the cloud industry today. So San Francisco and Silicon Valley still as relevant as ever, I guess. So thanks, guys, and thanks, Miguel, for getting Jason in, and of course to Wyra for being our global partner this year and supporting this year's edition of InCubed. So our next topic, we're going to continue in a core area of interest for InCubed, which is about the scaling stage of companies. InCubed is really targeted and focused on the scale-up stage of the entrepreneur companies who have already founded, established, maybe hit that product market fit, expanding their teams, expanding internationally, and are now at the scale-up stage. Our next panel are a group of entrepreneurs and investors with vast experience in scaling up their companies, both in Spain and of course in the US, the two key ecosystems that we're connecting here today at InCubed. So it is a great pleasure. I get to introduce Laura, Ignacio, and Jonathan. Are you there, guys? Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Liz. Hello, everybody.
Hi, guys. Great to see you. Thank you for connecting at this year's edition of InCubed. I'm going to kick off with a question to Laura. And just to give you guys a little bit of context, Laura is president and CEO of Redpoints. Redpoints is one of the leading scale-ups out of Spain in recent years, with over 650 clients across Europe and the US. They've raised over $69 million in financing from international VCs with over 250 employees. A real stellar and top performing from the ecosystem here. And no doubt, Laura, of course, you have a lot of experiences and lessons and tales to share with us today. Laura joined the company in 2014, taking over as CEO, and has driven the business from strength to strength. Named by AED as the best CEO in Spain in the startup category and recognized as one of the top 50 SaaS CEOs in 2019 by the SaaS report. Laura, you've been busy. Wow, amazing growth by Redpoints in recent years.
Yes, thank you.
And we're thrilled to have you with us today, so thanks for making the time. Laura, you guys entered the US market in 2019. You have clients there, you have investors there, you now have a physical presence there. What advice can you give to the next generation of Spanish entrepreneur considering entering the US market?
Well, the truth is we will go from the beginning. We did not start by verticals in the very early days. So, for instance, if we wanted to sell to top companies, we were selling to any those companies wherever we were. So, from the very early days, we were selling to Australia, Japan, US, and so on. Once we had our office already in the US, that we sold inside Barcelona, I decided to set up first office in New York. And that office in New York, 2018, now we have in New York and Salt Lake City. Why did we decide that? Well, we decided that mainly because of the time difference, the time zone. To reach the clients is so much easier once you're there, and of course because of the culture. You were asking what are the advices that I will give to Spanish entrepreneurs, and for me the main advice will be to country. If you really want to US, well, first to very careful that US is really your market, but if it is the market you want to address, you have to bet on the market. Many Spanish startups, they start only with one person, two people. I really have to start with him. And be ready to do a lot of iterations, because when you enter a country such as US, where we were listening to Jason, there's so much competition for talent that you're going to get the A talent. What you're going to get is the B, or in the best case, the B. You're probably going to get the C talent when you enter the US. So you're going to need to do missions to make a team there. So be ready to bet and be ready to
A little bit of connectivity issues, so we're going to come back to that question again, just to reiterate what you were talking about, access to talent and how important that is. And I suppose as an international company, you might have to make do with kind of B tier, C tier talent and see how you can break through that and build the tier A teams, I guess, that you want to see in the US. And we're going to hop over to Ignacio, Dr. Ignacio Hernandez. Thank you so much for being here, founder of Savannah. Just to give you guys a little bit more background, Savannah is a medtech company based out of Spain here, founded in 2014. It's an international medical company aiming to accelerate health science by giving healthcare providers the power to unlock all of the clinical value embedded in their electronic health records, applying artificial intelligence such as clinical natural language processing. Savannah has just now closed their Series B in mid-October, which is a wonderful achievement in the middle of a pandemic. A $15 million Series B round led by Cathay Innovation and Seaya Ventures. So Ignacio, congratulations, an amazing milestone hit there. And I understand a lot of this fundraising will be put to entering the US market. So can you share with us a few ideas? How are you guys going to tackle the US market? What's the plan?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I am also having connectivity issues, problems hearing you. Hopefully you can hear me well. So I will proceed.
We can hear you loud and clear, so fire away.
Okay, that's good. So yes, for us, we're in healthcare, and the US is clearly the strongest market. I mean, by large. Out of the 3,000 hospitals we have to conquer, 2,000 are in the US. So it's really big there. And there is no doubt, there has never been doubt for us that we should go there. The only thing is that before going playing in that field, we had to be ready with working properly and also having the right leads, which in our case are connected through the pharmaceutical companies, our customers, which put us in touch. So once we've been ready, it was quite clear that we had to jump there.
Why do you think now is the right time, Ignacio? I mean, were you waiting to get an investor on board? Do you have some initial clients there?
Yeah, so first of all, we've noticed traction. That was a doubt at the beginning. We didn't know if what we have invented, which is basically a different way of doing medical research, where we automate the extraction and analysis of information from the hospitals. At the beginning, we didn't really know if it was an European thing or an American thing as well. And we had to try it. So what we did was starting having meetings and checking that the needs of the doctors in the US are essentially the same. So once we know that, we're basically for doing that. And the moment we had the first hospitals not even touching the country, we realized that there was no real reason to keep waiting. Actually, what we've done is quite revolutionary in the sense that the way of generating science that we have invented is fully new. It didn't exist. And the only thing that is happening now is that a good number of companies are doing the same, are mimicking our model. We already identified a few in Israel, in the US, also in Europe. So it's really time to rush for us. We have 3 years of advantage, and we didn't want to lose that advantage.
That's amazing. It's wonderful, I guess, to go out to the market and see that maybe you have less competition than expected, given your solution is so revolutionary. So just to go a little bit deeper on that point, were you able to close your first few customers without actually landing in the US at that point? Or was it more market research, see that there's an opportunity there, and now go all in and put people on the ground?
Well, to be totally accurate, we did go there before the pandemic, and we had a few meetings, and then we closed the contracts already from here. But what we've done in our particular case, I was supposed to be moving there in February, precisely in February, to New York City in our case, and because we couldn't do that, we've started hiring people there, so that we are now doing what we call a shadow. Which is helping and supporting the American team, and we work as one, and it's working pretty well. We either probably never going to take the same amount of resources that we would have taken before the pandemic. So eventually I will move, because as a founder, I want to be there. But maybe if we were going to set 2 teams, 1 per coast, 20 people per coast, now maybe it's going to be 10 and 10.
Excellent. Interesting to see how companies are adapting their strategies, obviously, to the current situation. Nice to see that you guys have essentially done a hybrid model in terms of entering the market. So well done, and very best of luck with it. And we'll dive in a little bit later afterwards. But I want to hop over to Jonathan. Jonathan, welcome to InQ 2020. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
You are founder and investment director of Expert Dojo. I believe this is one of the most active accelerators, if not the most active accelerator in Los Angeles, an international accelerator that invests across the US, but also around the world, expecting up to 100 investments this year. Amazing achievement. So congratulations. I believe you might even have one in Spain. So tell us, Jonathan, what is your experience when you're looking at international companies? How are they thinking about entering the US market? Do you look at companies that are specifically looking to enter the space, or is it more a global perspective in terms of the markets they're targeting?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we look for is companies with a global focus. So we don't particularly focus on just the United States. A lot of our partners come from abroad. So though we are headquartered in Los Angeles, we're able to help with them scaling across the world. So we've done investments in most major countries. We've actually had 2 investments in Spain now. So we're very active there. Our founder's actually from Spain originally. So that's why we've had a couple companies there. But really, the big thing we see when they're trying to break into the US market, we've seen on the B2B side, it tends to be a little easier for a lot of them just because they're able to build some early relationships, especially if they have some US investors in there, and they're really able to get those partnerships going early. The B2C side tends to be a little trickier just because the culture is just a little bit different. And the US is so big, there's different cultures in different parts of the US, so it's hard to really, like, California is different than New York is, and then if you go to like the southern United States, it's way different than the rest of it too. So it's really different in finding those different markets within the United States, just because it is so large and it's so diverse across the entire spectrum too.
Wow. So what would be some of the common mistakes, I guess, that you see maybe companies coming into the US for the first time that aren't necessarily familiar with these nuances? What are some common mistakes you guys see?
I think a lot of people try to do it abroad too much and don't really focus on. I think it's really important to have people in the United States and that know the market well enough to do that. Whereas if you're just running remotely and trying to get things over there, it might take too long. We've had a couple companies we've worked with. I'll use an example of a company we had that was in Finland, and they were doing really well in revenues, and they tried to scale the company to the United States, and they were just running things remotely in Finland. And they just found that they basically couldn't scale it quickly enough in the United States without boots on the ground there. So they actually had to move a couple people over there to really scale there. And now they're doing very well here as well. So really you got to really, if you want to conquer a bigger market like the United States, you have to go all in on that. You can't just slowly get in there if you want to really scale it there.
Yeah, I guess, and it probably helps to have people like you on the ground who can kind of hold the hand of companies going through that process. I love the way you can see as well with accelerator programs and wider entrepreneurial platforms with broad portfolios, like you guys, like Wyra, who's our partner this year at Incubed. There's real cross-contamination in learning, I guess, so you can kind of maybe accelerate the learning process there between companies who are going through the same thing and kind of trying to avoid different errors. So I think particularly the accelerator and early stage fund model has a great opportunity to kind of share that learning across the portfolio. So clearly that seems to be what you guys are doing. Laura, I'm going to jump back to you because we had a little bit of disturbance earlier on in the connection that I believe we have resolved. You were talking, Laura, about actually building out your team in the US. So as I mentioned earlier, you guys entered the market remotely in 2019, you closed an investor there, and now you actually have presence and an office and people on the ground in the US. You were talking about getting access to the right talent and maybe having to settle for a C level or a B level as opposed to an A level hire, maybe being an international company with less of a local reputation. How are you guys tackling that issue? Did it take some time? Are you now getting the key A-level hires you're looking for in the US? Maybe talk us a little bit through that process.
Yeah, sure. So I can't agree more with Jonathan, because it's true. I mean, if you want to conquer the United States, what I was explaining or trying to explain before when I had bad connection is that you have to bet, and it's not enough that you go there with one person, with two people. No, you have to build from the beginning a full team. So yes, at the beginning you're no one over there, and of course if you have an American investor, it helps a lot because there's network. But still, no, the competition for the talent is huge in the United States. So at the beginning, you just have to go and try to get the best, but be ready to fire really fast and to let go very fast. while you are making yourself a name, while your sales are, you're increasing and you're growing your sales over there. Because we really went there in 2018, 2 years ago. And when we had sold like 30 clients remotely, and since then we've grown there like, now we have 2 years later, about 350 clients, are only in the US, I mean, enterprise clients. So what you have to do there is, of course, build your network. And once you build your network, bring good people that bring more good people. I mean, the secret is that the good people bring more good people. And of course, be ready to pay the check, Be ready to pay, because one of the other problems is that as European companies, we're used to much lower salaries than in US, especially in Spain, and then you go there and sometimes you don't meet the requirements. So it doesn't only require, when you go there, to be good hiring talent and be ready to do iterations on the team, but also be ready to do a big investment in the country. Of course, it helps a lot if you're a good company and you show world-class metrics and world-class KPIs. And if you grow like 100% yearly, like we've been doing.
Wow, that's really impressive growth, Laura. That you've kind of tenfold, I guess, is the growth in clients from 30 to over 350 in the US market in 2 years. So that's pretty commendable. And just on brief reflection, you've obviously learned a lot in this process. You've done it very successfully. Any thinkings or advice for entrepreneurs? Anything you wish you knew then that you know now, having gone through that experience, that you can share with the InCube community?
Well, I've done a master's landing in US now, but it's very important. One of the things that also Jonathan was saying about the culture, the American culture and the European culture is quite different. And maybe sometimes when it comes to negotiation, so even hiring this talent, or even selling to the clients. So you really need to have the people there that knows how to do it, how to talk to clients, how to talk to employees. Since the very beginning, that's another thing that I didn't mention. We had an HR director over there, a US HR director, that because, as I say, it's very important to talk their talk, So to have local people, directors over there is also really important. And what is also very important is to make room for the willing to grow professionally that the teams have in US, because people in US, they want to progress very quickly. And especially sales team, that is many European countries, we build sales teams over there, and you have to make sure that you grow enough to so they can progress. Otherwise, they're gonna leave your company.
Wow, it's interesting to hear, of course, about the cultural nuances, I guess, and how we can adapt there. Interesting tip on hiring a local HR director. Jason Lemkin earlier was talking about the challenges in hiring a VP, and Miguel Arias was mentioning, well, to a Spaniard, anyone kind of speaking really good English sounds competent, but might not be the case. So I guess local HR professionals as well can help you navigate through some of that. So really, really interesting point. And just to open up to the floor to any of you guys, Ignacio, Jonathan, Laura, what do you think? There's obviously a lot of obstacles that European companies and Spanish companies have to get over to do well in the US market, let's say. But what do you think are some of the advantages that international companies have, maybe alongside their US counterparts? Ignacio, you mentioned that you were happy to find that your solution was kind of innovative enough to compete, but what other advantages do you guys think international companies actually have to be able to compete in the US market?
Well, if I have to speak in general, we all know how this works with the salaries of the programmers and how different they are between the US and Europe. And maybe the fact that we are in Madrid is helping us attracting a lot of talent that probably if we were in Silicon Valley or in Boston, it would be impossible to attract. And mostly because we're something with a good mission from a human point, it's easier a bit for us to attract talent combined with the possibilities that Spain offers as a way of living. And more specifically in my field, because it's all very related to science and to prestige and all these things among the doctors, the European doctors are very well considered around the world. And so when we show up, there's really not a difference. I mean, compared to technology, where it's much more difficult for companies coming from Europe to prove that they're as good as some of the technology you can find there. In science, it doesn't work like that. It's really a worldwide network, and a good scientist in Madrid or in London can be as good as one in New York or in California. So it's really quite smooth, let's say, the process for us.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments, guys? Yeah, Laura.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I think that for us European countries, companies, now we are kind of sexy for investors all over the world. So one of the things is that some years ago there were not American investors looking at us, but now if you're able to show world-class KPIs and the potential of the market and a good team, you're very attractive for investors. So many American investors are willing to bet on European companies, companies that they may want to address the US market now or not. It's not necessary, as long as you prove how big you can make your company. So that is another advantage that we have now, the European companies, that we are in the radar of American investors too, and they're willing to help us go into the US market, while some years ago it was more difficult for us.
That's an interesting point, Laura, because actually this has been reflected a little earlier in the afternoon by Javier Mejias, who's looking at the investment landscape, particularly in Spain, and we've seen that there's been more US investment in Spain in 2020 than there actually had been in 2019 or 2018, which shows that there's appetite for that, which is amazing. Jonathan, you might comment on that. I think gone are the days where an portfolio company had to be an hour away, right? Typically, 10, 15 years ago, an hour drive or an hour flight is about as far as a VC partner would go. But you guys are also seeing a different story. What's your kind of direct experience in that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID's actually changed a lot of the way the investors think now. I think the world has actually become a lot smaller since COVID happened. I mean, everyone's working from their own house now. Everyone's working from their bedroom, wherever. So I think it's really opened up to the fact that we can really be anywhere and still be connected together. So we have companies all around the world, and we speak to them almost every day still, because it's not hard to speak with somebody on COVID. During this time, everyone's working from home, and I think it's just changed the whole dynamic of that. I mean, the investors still have the capital to invest, and they're looking for the companies. And I think they're starting to see they don't need to be in Silicon Valley paying $5,000 a month for an apartment when they can be in Spain and actually building a real business there. I think, a lot of what, when we look internationally, I think the funny thing we see is companies internationally tend, especially in Europe, tend to actually build the business. They show KPIs, they show that they're actually developing the product, and then they look for investment. Whereas in Silicon Valley, they just say, "I want to do this. Just give me money now." So yeah, it's kind of different here.
A little bit of what Jason said earlier, the resilience of the European entrepreneurs, I think is kind of great, getting through those first 24 months, as you say, essentially bootstrapping now and trying to get to some revenue and then thinking about scaling. Folks, thank you so much for being with us. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. It's hard to kind of dive deep into three vast experience profiles we have here with us today, but that's unfortunately all we have time for. Thank you so much for being at InCube 2020 in this crazy context and circumstance. I think we didn't do too bad considering. And thanks a million. Hopefully we'll see you guys back in 2021 and wish you all the rest of success for your businesses for 2020. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
Care.
Thank you.
Wow, well, we are almost at a wrap for InCubed 2020. How exciting it has been. We have covered so many areas. First, looking at the ecosystem here in Spain, what has been happening in 2020. plenty of negatives, but a lot of positives there actually on the horizon in terms of what's happening with the investment trends. Amazing to hear from Jason Lemkin, absolutely phenomenal speaker, just so experienced and really on the pulse of things of what's happening in terms of SaaS and cloud in Silicon Valley. So wonderful to have him with us. And of course, the conversation being facilitated by Miguel Arias, who is a SaaS enthusiast himself, a serial SaaS entrepreneur and now head of entrepreneurship at Telefonica. And of course, covering the YREP programs, who have kindly supported us this year as our global partner at InCubed. So we are almost finished, but I am now going to move just a few short words from 3 more of the founding partners of InCubed. So as I mentioned it, as you all know, InCubed is a collaboration between the US Embassy in Madrid, Chamberí Valley Association of Scale-Up Entrepreneurs, Endeavor, the International High Impact Entrepreneurship Program, the Venture City, a venture and acceleration fund based both in Madrid and in Miami, and of course South Summit, the global international platform for fostering innovation and building the international entrepreneurial ecosystem. So right now, to close out, delighted to invite 3 friends to take the stage, our virtual stage, in Ander Michelena, who is founder of All Iron Ventures and previously founder of Tickabiz, who sold out to eBay. Ander is also president of the Chamberí Valley Association. Antonio Iglesias is managing director of Endeavor in Spain. And Santiago Canalejo, who is the COO at the Venture City. Antonio, Ander, Santiago, thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you, Liz. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Liz. A pleasure.
Guys, I'm going to hand over the floor to you. Ander, what are your thoughts? How has InCubed been for you in 2020?
So, first of all, let me thank Jason for his time. His energy and advice was truly inspiring, and I mean it for sure. And let me tell you something. It made Miguel extremely happy because he was not joking that Jason is his idol. So, I think he makes a lot of us very happy, but Miguel especially. So thank you for that, Jason. And of course, thank you for the US Embassy, South Summit, Endeavor, everybody, for incredible support on making this. I think the event was great. My only regret is that we could not do this in person. One of the main reasons we started InCube, and Liz, you were there from moment zero, is to feel the connections among our participants. And unfortunately, this year, with this current format, this is going to be much harder. But I really hope this is the one and only digital edition we do of InCube, and that we are back to normality for next edition. So hopefully, with that thought, hope to see all of you in person very soon.
What are your thoughts?
Hey, thank you, Ander, and thank you, Liz. So you guys can hear me, right?
We are.
So Endeavor's founder, Linda Rottenberg, she likes to say that when economies turn down, entrepreneurs turn up. This is definitely a time where economies are turning down, and entrepreneurs are more important than ever, right? In this time of global turmoil, we need global solutions. And innovation ecosystems around the world need to be connected and build on each other's, right? On each other's progress. And so having companies that are able to reach scale is more important than ever. So I believe that building bridges between the US and Europe, between the US and Spain, right, will make a difference, not only for entrepreneurs, but for society in general. So initiatives like that international collaboration can happen, right? That entrepreneurs, investors, and institutions are collaborating. And I think it's particularly relevant that this year, a year where we're not being able to see each other in person, InCube is still happening, right? It shows that willingness to collaborate in the ecosystem. So my thoughts, I really hope that the example of people like Jason, Nacho, or Laura will serve as inspiration for some of the entrepreneurs in the audience, and will hopefully pave the way for a brighter future. At Endeavor, we're very optimistic about the future, in fact, right? Because we know what entrepreneurs are capable of, and we know that there are many players in the ecosystem that are willing to collaborate with these entrepreneurs, right? And I think the 6 organizers of this event are a really good example of that, right? So obviously, I'd like to thank the US Embassy, South Summit, the Venture City, Chamberí Valley, and WIDA for making InCube viable and for making it happen once more this year. And hopefully, we'll be able to do this in person next year. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Antonio. Santiago from the Venture City, thanks for being here with us. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for inviting us again this year. Thanks for the American Embassy in Madrid and the rest of the organizers, the panelists, the audience, and Maria, of course, for inviting us again. I couldn't agree more with the rest of the person that participated, also the organizers. I think the proposal that you are putting into the table makes a lot of sense. Our company, the Venture City, has a very tight relations with this event because we basically share not only common objectives, but we see huge opportunities in these relations between the US and the Spanish companies. No, the good thing in our experience, even though we've been in this business for 3 years, the good thing is that we've been able to validate this thesis, no? that there's really opportunities. And in just 3 years, we've been investing and helping in more than 70 different startups where, 2/3 of those are companies that are either from the US or Spanish companies. No? And it's true that we face a lot of challenges and there's a lot of uncertainty. And as Antonio, Jason, and the rest of the panelists were addressing, this is not going to be easy, but we believe from the Venture City that we have 2 things that puts us in a better position than other sectors. We have the entrepreneurs and we have the technology. The entrepreneurs, they bring these new ideas, the new visions, the determination, the talent that is present now everywhere. They bring resilience and they bring commitment, and these things are more important than ever to build the good companies. And then we have technology that we know that is more accessible and affordable than ever. So we're able to do these events online and, for instance, get a lot of the insights that we would do with our physical presence. We would love to be present next year. We're going to be ready to do that. I hope that you invite us again, and I hope that we can still build this kind of bridges among the US and the Spanish entrepreneurs, investors, institutions, everybody here to make this a great success as it's been until now. So thank you again for inviting us this year.
Santiago, thank you. Antonio, Santiago, thank you so much, and we'll definitely have you back for next year's edition of InCubed. Folks, that's a wrap from us at our home makeshift studio in the South Summit HQ here in Madrid. Huge apologies for any of the technical difficulties, and thank you so much for sticking through and bearing with us this year's virtual edition. As a lot of people have spoken already, we'd love to see each other face to face next year. Let's see how things are, but we'll continue to drive forward, move on, and innovate to make sure that things get done. So that's a wrap from here at InCubed 2020. We hope you have some tangible learnings to take home about how to scale up your business. Entrepreneurs turn up when economies turn down. I adore that, Antonio, from your founder, Linda Rottenberg. That is an amazing quote, and I think super relevant, of course, today. And we'll just leave you with that one. So that's all from us. Thank you so much from here at the South Summit studio. Take care, and we'll see you at InCubed 2021. Thank you.